We started the story meeting the protagonist, Natsuo, a guy who likes writing and also likes his English teacher. He lives alone with his father, since his mother died 10 years ago. That on a trip with his friends he met a girl named Rui Tachibana, a little expressive girl. Natsuo felt curious and approached him as he seemed a bit disgusted. But she told him that she was normal. The protagonist saw a similarity with his teacher, and this girl proposed to escape together, so he agreed. They come home and Rui asked if he could do him the favor of having relationships with her. The dirty Natsuo asked why he chose him, and she told him she wanted to have experience, and as it was noted that he was not expert at all, he chose him, since so it would not be rustic with her. Natsuo was kind, just offended me desperately, but I accept. After all, Natsuo asked him if it was as he expected. For her it was normal, and not for him, but I felt that nothing had changed. He also told him that if they were to see again, they didn't know each other. The protagonist went to his best friend Fumiya's house to tell him, and he didn't feel very well, because he really is in love with his teacher. Natsuo used to go up to the roof to write her novel, where she sometimes frequented the teaser, called Hina, and one day saw her crying. She tried to hide it, but the protagonist insisted, telling him he was concerned about her. However, she told him that adults have their own problems. He wanted to explain that he wasn't a child and even was about to declare his love for him, but a call interrupted him. Natsuo arrives at his house and his father told him that he had long wanted to tell him something, but everything went very fast, and that he was thinking of getting married, and they would soon go to visit him. He suddenly referred to 3 seconds, because they were already knocking on the door, and he meets Tsukiko Tachibana, his father partner, accompanied by his 2 daughters, Rui and Hina. The man after seeing this was deaf. Everyone came forward and being alone, Rui told her they would act as if nothing. She did not want to ruin her mother's happiness, because her father, with his infidelity, made her suffer much. After they left, his father told him he had bought a second-hand house, and he will move with them all together next week. The protagonist told his best friend all the situation, and this one told him that if it was an impossible love before, now he should surrender completely. It was the first night in the family, and Hina got drunk while watching television. This fell asleep, and the protagonist tried to kiss her, but Rui went out and saw it. She dragged her sister into her room, saying she always did it and that it was partly Hina's fault to end up doing so. While in the preparation, everyone was talking about a new girl, which, guess, turned out to be Rui. Natsuo told him they would keep the secret, because if people knew they lived together, rumors would circulate. Rui took this wrong. The protagonist asked Hina for the same, because she kept the secret, and also asked her if she remembered what had happened last night. She got nervous and asked if she had kissed him. Natsuo, excited, said no, but it was really because he had already happened to him before with a friend. While in the lounge, Natsuo noticed that Rui uncautiously pushed people away, so he began to train her so that she could have friends. While at home, the protagonist was going to shower and didn't realize that Rui was there. Nervously, he quickly got out of the bathroom, but this told him he would go in. Natsuo thought it was for something else, but really asked her if the kiss she tried to give Hina was to encourage her for her boyfriend. Natsuo asked her if she was going through a tough moment, and she said that if she doesn't know anything, she then forgot it, leaving the poor Natsuo with the joke halfway. One day at breakfast, their parents tell them they will present their wedding papers and they will be alone at dinner. So the drunkard told them no to worry, as there was an adult in the house. The protagonist was delighted with the banquet that the teacher had made with Rui. Natsuo loved the food, and when she asked what she had prepared him, Hina said that everything had been done by Rui, and she had cut the tomatoes. The protagonist offered to clean the dishes while talking to Hina. She told him that if she had any problems, she would tell him without containing. Natsuo took advantage of asking him and was going badly with his boyfriend, but she said she didn't want to talk about that. They started joking and playing, and Hina shrugged. Being about to fall, Natsuo caught her, typical situation. But she was interrupted by Hina's phone. She was called Shu. She answered and told him she would go out in a moment. Natsuo told him that it was dangerous, too late, but she told him that he would not leave the house and that he would stay inside. After 20 minutes, when Natsuo decided to go to find her, she heard that she screamed, "Stop!" He went in running. Natsuo, worried, asked her what was going on, and then she told her that it was nothing and that everything was fine and that it wasn't nosy. Suddenly someone tried to open the door and they started to knock many times. Hina told him not to open. Her sister heard everything and asked what was going on and how no one answered because she opened the door, but only her parents were a little bit drinking. Hina just apologized to the protagonist and left. The next day Natsuo goes to the bar where his friend Fumiya works and greeted Masaki. The protagonist tells them everything that happened, saying that he doesn't believe that Hina's relationship is healthy. His friend tells him that what Natsuo felt was jealousy, and he knew it because he felt the same with the women who were going to go out to the bar, wanting all to leave their toxic and go out with him. As Fumiya leaves the bar, she points out a girl, saying she was the adulterous worker who had gone to the bar. This was Hina. Despite being in shock, the protagonist went to face her and asked her if she was with a married man. She said yes, which changed the way. Hina told him that these were adult things and that he would not get involved. The impulsive Natsuo kissed her and she struck him, however she kissed him again, threw him into his bed and opened his shirt. But he told him that although he was very daring, she still had a child's eyes. Hina got up, opened the door and the protagonist went to his room to see why. Natsuo did not endure the situation and went to Fumiya's house, worrying everyone. Days pass and Rui can't find her. She also left home and would not return until her sister left that guy. Natsuo and Fumiya tell them that she already knew what her sister was, as one day she heard them talk by phone and confronted her, telling her that she was sick and should leave. Hina scared if he had ever embraced someone he loved, and as Rui didn't know what to answer, she said he understand. That's why Rui did what he did with Natsuo. They had a plan to leave the unbeliever. Both are back home and their parents were about to divorce, as they thought it was their fault, and Natsuo and Ryu apologized, and Hina fell on her knees crying, asking for forgiveness from Natsuo. The next day everything was calm, but Natsuo was indifferent to Hina. Now start the mission to spy on the drunk. They started following her until they could see who that guy was. The first day they followed her to a bar, and after 4 hours no one came. Hina had written the initials to SH on his agenda at 7 p.m., so the protagonist said it was probably by the name Shu, from the call he received the other day. She followed her to this place and SH was for showtime. Days passed, they kept watching and nothing. They even stole his phone so that Rui imitated Hina's voice and ended it, but they didn't. Natsuo and Rui went to the bar to tell Fumiya and Masaki when Hina came with the unbeliever. Everyone was in shock for several seconds, but Natsuo couldn't contain and took it out of her shirt, telling her that she knew how bad she was doing, that she would break with her and not make her unhappy. Masaki tried to calm the situation and made them sit down. This guy presented himself as Shu Hajiwara, 32 years, married, and has been talking to Hina for 2 years. Rui wanted to know who had spoken to her. Herein first, to know the alleged culprit. So it was Shu who invited her to go out to Hina. He apologized because he hoped to present himself correctly and not in that situation, which altered the protagonist, since he should not present himself for being an adulteress with his wife at home, calling him disregarded and selfish. He told her that he loved her, that he knew he had a wife, but would leave everything for her, only that he needed time. Rui said yes and threw water on Shu while he was crying. Natsuo reached her and thanked him for what he had done, as he would have opted for the fists. Rui burst out and started out by the anger he felt towards that guy. On the other hand, the unfaithful said he noticed that Natsuo loves her and asked him what he thought of him. Hina told him not to be stupid, that Natsuo is just a kid, and that they are his family, who will not ask rare things. Hina told her that after what happened she decided they had to stop being seen by the guys and that manipulator embraced her and asked what she really felt, because in the end that was what matters, not the others. The next morning was Tuskiko's birthday and, like very year, Hina, happy, asked her sister what she would buy this year, but she simply ignored her, told Natsuo to go together, and he also rejected her. Fuji explained that every year he visits his mother that day. It shows us how the last days they visited Natsuo's mother in the hospital, and he was crying for everything. His mother bought him things for training, saying he'd like to be there to console him always, but he knew it couldn't be so. Natsuo brought flowers to her mother, and suddenly Rue and Hina came, and they brought something that her mother liked, accompanied by flowers. Hina told the protagonist that she had ended up with Shu, since half a year ago she was hesitant about leaving her wife, and in the bottom she knew she would never do it, but she didn't dare to leave him, since he was her first love. But they were more important to her. Both kindly approached the tomb and presented themselves with Natsuo's mother, which moved him. One day in the preparation, Rue met a girl named Momo, a kind girl, as he even gave him one of the dolls that makes Rue. While in class, Rue's friends saw this doll and threw it into the garbage, telling him about the girl's bad reputation, as it seems to be easy with men. Rue got up to look for the doll and told them that even if it was true, she was the one who decided whether she was in a relationship with Momo or not. After classes, Rue and Momo go home. Rue obviously couldn't stand it and asked the girl if she had a lot of experience with the boys. Momo told him that humbly, it must be about 30 with whom her has slept, but that he has no luck with them, as they always end up being unfaithful or violent. Because of this bad reputation, they don't have many friends, and Rue agreed to be her friend. They go to a bookstore and come to Natsuo. Momo comes and they start talking. The protagonist was being kind, and Momo was almost already in love with Natsuo. When they are leaving, a bike almost collided with Momo, and Natsuo saved her, leaving her even more arrowed. However, the protagonist remained only kind. This one goes away and Momo takes it to ask Rue if he could fall in love with Natsuo. Rue told her why he asked her, and Momo said if he liked her, he didn't want to get involved. Rue told her that it didn't concern her. Saying this, Momo asked for her support to get out with him. Rue did not stop thinking about this, so much that even he got a fever. Momo, on the other hand, gave a note to Natsuo, inviting him to leave. She arrives at the house. Rue asks if Momo had invited her out, and yes, she had given her number to talk online, but doesn't have the app. Rue asked the protagonist for a towel, hot water, and his pajamas, because he was sweating too much, when suddenly 3 seconds did not pass and Rue had already taken off his clothes, asking the protagonist to shave his back. The protagonist, while he did it, repeated himself over and over again, "Is my sister and is sick." Finally, Hina wrote to her asking for Rue and if she could take care of her. Rue asked Natsuo if he was in love with someone, and this did not understand his random question, so this tells him about Momo's falling in love and that he had asked for his support, but when imagining the protagonist coming out with her, he feels a pressure in his chest. I wanted to know what he felt. Rue started to beat and his fever rose. The protagonist called Sakiko and even told him there were some suppositories in the fridge. The protagonist takes them away and Rue says he can't wear them. Let him do it. He asks them to make at least a minimum effort. And Rue insisted that he put it on. The protagonist, then, did not arm himself with courage and maggot to do so. They were all grateful for taking care of their sister. Even his father cried of happiness. Natsuo comes to school and Momo approaches him. He apologized for not answering and said he had no line. Momo said she was glad to know that and that it wasn't because she hated her. His friends saw him with Momo and told him about her. One of them told him that he once slept with her, but that it was best not to get involved much, as he said it was rare. Momo had prepared beef fast to share with Natsuo, as he does it when someone likes him. For her it was better to be honest with people and try it, because otherwise she would regret not doing it. The protagonist was a little head down and she asked him what was happening to him. He told her there was something he wanted more than anything, but he could not say it or give up. Referring to the teacher, Momo saw him very sad and invited him to his house. At Momo's house, they both kissed and the protagonist only thought of doing so to forget his teacher, since, yes, there were rumors about Momo, but according to him, at least he wasn't part of his family or teacher. Suddenly, a message came from Rue, asking him what he wanted for dinner. Momo gets something sad, as she always eats alone at home. They followed his way, and Natsuo followed his way, and the protagonist noticed that he had some wounds on his dolls. Momo, nervous, insisted that they were old wounds and that he was well. However, the protagonist got up and asked Momo if there was any supermarket nearby. The protagonist cooked Momo and told her that when she felt alone, she would warn her and they would eat together again. That made Momo cry, as everyone was scared of his wounds and no one had said anything like that to him. The next morning, the protagonist was on the roof reading and noticed that his language teacher, Korea, was also there. Her teacher is proud to see her read, so they started talking about novels, which he told her that he had a very good taste. He took it from the beard and said something phrases. Rue asks the protagonist to accompany her to choose a club to join. He also tells her that Momo told her that the protagonist had cooked her, something he had never done at home, and the protagonist tells her that because she cooked amazing. The friends of the protagonist accompanied them to clubs, only to see girls exercise, and they left. They both went to a literary club, but there was no one. Natsuo took a book borrowed and Rue was somewhat doubtful because it was without permission, but as he also wanted to read and he accepted. The protagonist returned to return the book and Korea was kissing a student. They feared Natsuo and the girl explained that she was going to get a spoon in the eye of the professor and took it away. Korea asked him if he believed they were doing something indecent, and the protagonist said no, but as Korea noticed that the protagonist had taken a book, he took advantage of it to force him to join the club. He tells his student that Natsuo, by complete own will, wanted to join, and all excited, presented himself as Mio Ashihara, the club president. Korea ordered her to share flights with Mio to try to recruit more members. Mio tells Natsuo that being the only person there, he can be considered a club, and so he can participate in the presentation session. I'm glad that at least one person has been interested in the club. When they separated to share volants, Rue arrived, and the protagonist told him that when he went back the book got into trouble. Suddenly Korea came and told him that he is now another member. I tried to attract more people. On the other hand, Mio had not given up a wheel because he speaks very lowly. She felt very sad, but the protagonist encouraged her. In their first class, the professor asked them if they had ever written a novel, and they were just about to finish a romance. He told them that falling in love would give them more depth to the novel, and so that it wasn't immature, he proposed to kiss them at that moment. Both were shocked, and Natsuo told him that kissing wasn't the same as falling in love, but Mio if he accepted. The protagonist approached, but said he kiss her by force, and Korea told him that by his actions he could understand his nature. While at home, while the protagonist was making a poster on duty, he told them about the club and how strange Korea was. Suddenly Rue said he wanted to join as he was interested in writing novels, something that would come well to the protagonist, as so they would be more people and would be easier to overcome. Being in the library and speaking through notes, Mio apologizes for the rare situation of the almost kiss, and Natsuo tells him that it had been all Korea's fault, not her. She also asked if the professor was bad, and she told him he was someone good, just maybe he was delighting a new guy in the club. The protagonist drew him the way he saw Korea and made her laugh. Rue and Momo went with Natsuo and told him that they would both join the club. Both went to present, and Mio knew Momo, because it turns out that Momo usually is among the top 10 ratings, and Mio asked why sometimes his notes dropped. She told her that when she has a boyfriend she doesn't study, but when she doesn't she studies out of bored. Mio and the protagonist begin to talk and Rue felt a bit of jealousy. Rue is a little bit overwhelmed again, telling Masaki that he has recently felt a strange discomfort. He spends the night thinking about someone's attitude towards her, who seemed to be a constant sidesome and doesn't feel herself. Masaki tells him that when she was the boss of the mafia, he met a man he fell in love with. He was distracted, and it was as if he had ceased to be him. He told her that feeling that discomfort was like a treasure, and that he would listen to her heart. Maybe he can give a name to what he feels like. On the other hand, Natsuo came home and Hina thanked him for not telling his mother anything about Shu. He also asked if they were going out somewhere on Sunday. They go out and both go out to eat. They know places together, and after a long day they ended up on the beach. They sat down and the protagonist told him he was curious. This didn't he understand why after what her mother had felt, Hina decided to have a romance with someone married. Hina was the age of the protagonist when she fell in love with Shu, and this was her first love. It turns out that Hina's friends distanced themselves from her, and one of those days where she was alone and sad appeared Shu, who was her English teacher. They spent time together until one day they transferred him and he could not see him again. One day, Hina was in college. She saw him again, only that with a detail: he was married. However, he told her to see again, and she could not contain herself. The protagonist felt identified and said he couldn't blame her because it might have been him. Natsuo took advantage of it to tell him that he had finished his novel, that he was inspired by it for the protagonist, and that he has been in love with her for a long time. Hina got up, took him by the hand, and asked if then they didn't say anything to their parents or to Rui. They were going out together. He took him to the sea and the protagonist asked him what was going on because he didn't understand anything. It was there when she told him that going out together would be like dying as they couldn't hide it. So he asked him if he would be willing to leave his family and everything to disappear. But Natsuo did not answer. Hina told him that when he returned to the coast they would still be brothers, that they would be well, so the protagonist told him to give him a last wish, and he hugged him while he was crying. They came home with new clothes, as the previous one was wet, and Tsukiko was happy that they spent time together. However, Rui did not look happy. In the evening, Hina read the protagonist's novel and began to cry, so she left her a note giving her thanks. Rui came to the room of the protagonist, from nowhere took his hand and asked if when they met they had kissed. Natsuo tells him that a kiss is special for him, so Rui asks him if they could do it, so curious. The protagonist told him they were now family, and Rui asked if then Hina was special. He tried to kiss her on the couch while she slept. He hid it saying that it had been by a push, but that they could not do so anyway, but the protagonist suddenly changed his mind and accepted. After kissing, Rui's fears disappeared and she felt more secure, telling the protagonist that it would be good if he felt like her too. The first was a total idiot. The next day, while Natsuo was talking to Myo, Rui and Momo arrived. Both were somewhat jealous and Natsuo told them that they should start preparing for the club's release. Suddenly Korea came in and told them that he admired what they were doing, but they were delayed with the final exams so they did nothing that would interfere with their student occupation. While at home, Rui and Natsuo asked for help from others to study. The professor told the protagonist that he had some grammar mistakes and Rui said it was probably because he was thinking of Mio. The protagonist obviously denied it. When it was a little later, the protagonist went to the teacher's room with her, and just when she was going in, he saw that he was giving love and said the name of Shu. Natsuo, in the middle of the shock, threw his notebook and the teacher listened. She ran out to see who was there, but the protagonist managed to hide and escape. The next day, Hina gives good days to protagonist, who are risen studying. This tells him not to exceed, because if the next day of the exam is tired, he will end up rejecting. But the protagonist only saw Hina's hand, as he could not see that hand like that. They finally submitted their exams and all received good grades. During the holidays, the protagonist felt that the professor, despite being as excited with him as always, acted differently than before. Natsuo tells Rui that he was somewhat stuck with his novel for the club and would ask for a reference book in the lounge. In what Rui asked if he had taken his underwear by chance. The protagonist said that clearly not, but she explained that apparently the cast clothes were missing only her. Finally, the protagonist arrives at school and is struck by a boy on a bicycle. The boy presents himself as Alex and he tells him they will be companions. The protagonist takes him to the bar and tells Masaki that he is a foreigner and they had transferred him. Masaki notes that Alex is all but humble and also tells them that the police asked her to place a warning as there appears to be an underwear thief. Leaving the bar, Alex and the protagonist stumbled upon the thief and began chasing him to catch him. They went to the police and Rue came to find his braces, of course. Alex told Natsuo that Rue was very beautiful and that she would present her. On the way home, Rue was telling him the things the police told him, but Natsuo could only think of what Alex had told him. While making dinner, the protagonist asked Rue if when he had free time they could both go out with Alex, as he seems to be interested in her. Rue obviously got upset, as the protagonist was trying to pair them up, so he left. Time later the prota brought food to Rue and apologized, but Rue did not stand and told him to apologize otherwise, so they kissed, but suddenly Hina entered and saw them in full. The protagonist went after her and even to her that it didn't matter what she said. Natsuo was devastated and Rue entered her sister's room to tell her that she had started it all, as she thought she might like it. Hina told him it wasn't right because they were family and Rue told him they weren't blood. However, Hina insisted that this would sadden her mother very much. The next day, the protagonist tells Alex that Rue didn't want to go out with him, but he'd give up. Also, when he saw the head-down front, he asked him if he had any problems. Inzuo told him it was familiar. Alex told her that he would never know the feelings of others if he did not ask, and the others would not know his feelings if he did not tell them. The protagonist armed with courage, and at night he went to Hina's room, but Rue had already advanced it. She told me that she was the one who started it all. He also told him what he felt and his point of view. But Hina still didn't understand why the protagonist had done it, so she asked him if he liked Rue. Natsuo said her feelings have not changed since they went to the beach, and Hina started to cry. The next day everyone heard the news and were happy for her, but Rue sadly asked her if it was her fault, and Hina said no. The father proposed that they all go out together while Hina followed there, so they would go to a pre-festival. The day arrives and being in the place, Rue tells the protagonist that he feels Hina is going for them, and that it would be best to stop for a while that of walking kissing. After this, Fumiya's workmate arrives and presents their son, so they go to Masaki so that she can know him too. On the other hand, Hina went to some games and her mother told her to call her when she finished, but Hina got her phone in the water and she was lost. Luckily, Natsuo has arrived. He told him they would separate from the people, so they took their hands. Hina thought she would take her with the others, but she took her to a place to talk to herself. Natsuo asked him if he was moving for him, and she said no, because he really thought it was a long time ago, only that he crossed up with that moment. The protagonist knew he was lying, so he continued to insist. She told him that she should do it for his good, and it was also something necessary that she should do for her. The protagonist did not understand what he meant, but she never told him. And as much as Natsuo contained her, Hina even bit him and ran away. The protagonist asked Masaki to catch her. And so was. Masaki told him that she should behave like an adult and talk to the protagonist, so they left them alone. The professor tells her that since Rue was a little girl she dared to do things, and that envied her because the teacher always had to behave. Rue, despite being so rare who he was and as Hina wanted to do the same, decided to move. It turns out that after seeing them kissing, rather than worrying about what happened to the family, I felt jealous. The protagonist smiled and told him that he finally listened to his true feelings. Hina took it as a joke, and when he was about to leave, the protagonist took her and hugged her, asking if it was okay to think that both of them love each other, and that instead of answering they would only stay like this for a while. The next day the protagonist was surprised because Hina's move was still standing because it really was a long time ago that she wanted to live alone, and it would be rare if she had cancelled after having told everyone. Yet she told the protagonist that she would not go far, and also there would be convenient to see, which made the protagonist super happy. How not? On the other hand, Rue was depressed by her sister and went to drink something fresh. Rue went to the bookstore to distract himself and met Korea. But he wasn't alone, he was accompanied by Shu. They were friends from the university. Rue had a face of hatred, and this told him that he had not called his sister again since then, and that if she wasn't busy, she wanted to apologize. So they all saved. She told Rue to ask for what he wanted him to pay, and she obviously asked for the most expensive. She tells her that in the end she divorced, but not because of Hina, but because they were not compatible. Rue asked why he didn't call her, but he didn't see it right because he would be selfish. Rue told her that she would move and believed it was her fault as they had a dispute. However, she told him that Hina doesn't do things for good and that she probably just doesn't want her to worry too much. Rue returns home and talks with Hina, crying asks her not to change, that will do whatever it is, even forget about Natsuo. Her sister told her not to worry and that she had to change nothing, that she could do whatever she wanted, but that in return she would be free. On the other hand, Natsuo came home, and the teacher had left him an envelope with the key to his house. Rue almost discovered it, but he knew how to hide it well. The next day, Natsuo was determined to go to the teacher's house and met Rue in Hina's vacant room. She hugged him and started crying, telling him at least she has it to him and she won't be alone. Time later, Fuji, the father, asks for Natsuo and Rue tells him that he had gone to Fumiya's house, but the protagonist was in the teacher's house. Natsuo comes in with the key and Hina is delighted to see it. Natsuo told her that he was determined and that he would be willing to die if he was with her, so they kissed. The protagonist tried to do something more, but the teacher told him not to rush as he would have a lot of time together. The holidays are over and they are back in class. Rue and Alex came forward and he was nervous. The protagonist talked to him about the literature club and he wanted to join because they were there. They spoke to Korea and despite Alex not reading anything, the professor accepted because there are 5 members who will promote them to club and so they would have a budget. Time later, Natsu was with his friends and they met the teacher. She joked with the friends of the prota, but he didn't talk to her. Natsuo felt bad, so then he sought her to talk. This told him that maybe she wasn't as ready as he was, but the protagonist just felt insecure. Hina told him that all she did was to take care of her relationship and that she felt the same as him. The subdirector came out of the corridor and both hid. The protagonist asked him not to avoid him so much and they kissed. Then Natsuo and Hina began to spend a lot of time together. The day of the cultural festival comes and everyone is having fun, although the foreigners don't so much. Hina and Natsuo did not come together, but they were looking at each other. Meanwhile, Professor Korea had been missing at school, as he seemed to be sick, so they decided to go visit him. When they arrived, Natsuo was impressed by where this man lived. When he played, he was received by a woman who was a publisher, as it turns out that the professor was a novelist, and when he said his name, it turns out that the protagonist was a mega fan. Korea already proposes to use her magazines for a contest, as they were asking for new publishers. Natsuo excited accepted, but Rue did not get much attention. While in school, the protagonist started joking with Mio that he liked the teacher and this pushed him. Sadly, the protagonist was near the stairs and he broke his leg. Hina came to see Natsuo, and he told her that with the leg like this she could no longer go to visit her as usual. Rue takes food to Natsuo. He is glad that he is broken, says his leg, as he could not get out and kiss him from nowhere. At school, Mio was totally sorry, and her rando apologized to her, telling her that she would pay her all the expenses. While at home, Natsuo was taking a bath and Rue entered. The nervous protagonist asked her what fucking stuff she did there, and she said she would help him, as with one leg it is harder. This told him that he would turn off the light not to see, as he felt that he failed the professor, when suddenly Rue unwillingly grabbed his friend Natsuo, and this was excited. Rue went to the bar, and when he saw Fumiya, he told him what had happened to the protagonist, and that he could not go to his house for a while. Fumi was already confused, and told him that Natsuo had not been going to his house for a long time. Rue asked Natsuo where he was actually going, and he again saying he was going lied to Momo's house. Rue got upset and told her that she was going to eat with Momo, so Natsuo apologized. Natsuo tells all Fumiya already, and this is glad for him, but tells him that the next day let her know of her lies at least. The protagonist thanked Hina's house, even without legs, and when they were about to take action, they knocked on the door. And friends, it was Rue. She saw the protagonist, and with tears in her eyes, she ran away without regard to the rain. The protagonist managed to find her and was all hit and dirty, as he couldn't walk well with the mules and the umbrella. Rue gives her a shake and then hugs him while he cries. She tells him that he worried because he didn't answer, so he went into his room to get some clue, and it was there that he found his novel and discovered everything. Natsuo confessed that he was in love with Hina, that they were out, and that he wants to be with her in the future. On the way to school, Rue told the protagonist that he would now hate him as a self-defense and would act normally while in the family. On the other hand, at school, Rue was also ignoring Hina. Days later, the prota could finally walk and everyone was happy because they would go on a school trip. Suddenly, Kiri came up with the results of the contest and had won Rue, something that made Prota and Mio very sad, as it was something they really wanted. Mio told protagonist to take advantage of that depression to keep trying. Natsuo went to Korea's house to ask him to be his disciple. The professor knew that this was Natsuo's dream. He told him that he believed the protagonist had more talent than Rue, as he has a strong desire to be a writer. But he asked him what he really wanted, whether to write novels or the position of being a writer. Upon returning home, the protagonist congratulated Rue for his award, but realized he was really jealous and felt idiot. Natsuo began to struggle and told Korea that he would write a short novel a week. Finally, the school trip arrives and everyone was having fun, especially Alex, who tasted a saisonner that had liquor and kissed Natsuo and Korea. Rue criticized Hina for her bikini, but Hina was only happy that her sister would talk to her again and told her that she would end up with Natsuo. However, Rue told him not to do so, as he knew there were feelings in the middle, so they made the peace. Hina told Prota to go to his room when he was in the artificial fire, as he wanted to talk to him about something. Upon arrival, Hina was going to finish him, but the protagonist opposed and gave him a ring, as he wanted to go seriously with her. He also told her that he wanted to give her a better ring in the future and marry her. Finally, the bed moved. After this, Natsu asked him when he started feeling something for him. And she told him that since they saw each other on the roof, only that she was still with Shu. Natsuo told her that she thought she would never forget it, as one day she saw her falling in love and said the name of Shu. Hina was ashamed, but told him that at that moment she was trying to control her feelings towards Natsuo, and she had nothing left but to think of Shu. Days later, already in school, the director called Hina to the conference room, but she had no idea why, and this showed him a photo where, friends, she was kissing Natsuo. Hina was paralyzed and could say absolutely nothing. The director took her silence as a response and she kneeled asking for forgiveness, saying she would accept any punishment, but that they would not do anything to Natsuo. When they were all gathered, they were told that a teacher who would be transferred would be a speech for him. It was Hina. No one could believe this. I felt everyone's sadness. Hina left a few beautiful words. He told them that he would never forget them. Natsuo and Rue did not understand anything about what was happening. Natsuo tried call her, but never answered. Hina was on the roof and Korea arrived, telling her that when she removed the novel from the front she suspected what was happening, but that she didn't come to reproach it. She only thought of how unfortunate fate was, as Shu also had feelings for her, though she was her student. On the other hand, Natsuo came running to Hina's department and was completely empty. Hina had left a letter for him, which said she had forgiven him and that she had asked for the transfer because they discovered their relationship. She told her she didn't tell her anything because she knew he'd left everything for her. He said he made his dream of becoming a writer a reality, that those 3 months were the best at his side and that he loved him. So we heard a loud scream of the poor Natsuo. Rue goes to the bar and tells Masaki and Fumiya everything, telling them that a week has passed and Natsuo remains in his room without doing anything. Fumiya went to see him and took him out of bed, telling him that she assumed all the guilt for him to fulfill his dream and that if he stayed so all Hina's effort would be in vain. So Natsuo started crying as he heard everything. Natsuo went to Korea's house and told him that he would leave the weekly stories for a while to write something longer, otherwise he could not go on. On the other hand, Sakiko hired a detective and already knew where Hina was. She was glad to know that she was safe. However, they won't tell anyone where she is for the good of all, and so her parents had already learned of the relationship that Hina and Natsuo had. The protagonist started writing without stopping and didn't even eat. Rue was worried and went to talk to the boys at sea. Masaki told him it was a progress and Fumiya told him he loses everything from sight when he focuses. Masaki took Natsuo to a sauna to take a medicinal bath and told him a sad story, telling Natsuo that he had many things in life and can only face them and continue to live. The protagonist began to eat, to improve little by little and to write without stopping, until finally ending his novel. He told Rue that he took everything he had and put it there. Her parents were delighted to see her and her friends too. Everyone accompanied him to bring his novel to Korea, and as it was New Year they took advantage of celebrating. Time later, Korea invited Natsuo to his home and introduced him to Tsutaya, and these took him to a famous awards as Korea presented the protagonist's novel and won the first prize. Then he gave him a speech. It turns out that Tsutaya is from Shinkosha's editorial team, and this one wants to work with Natsuo. The protagonist came to his room and saw Hina. He hugged her with all his strength, but it turned out to be Rue with long hair. Natsuo left his room, and Rue told him he wanted to be seen with long hair, and Momo borrowed him a haircut. Natsuo told her that he had won the first prize, and Rue, after the strong hug he gave to the protagonist thinking that he was Hina, could only ask if he had relationships with her. Natsu said yes, and from nothing, Rue kissed him and told him he would no longer stop for Hina. Thank you for watching the video. I'll see you in a few days with a new video. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other videos.